Welcome to the J.D. Levy & Associates Calibration Point Podcast. Our podcasts are designed to bring a conversational exploration of key topics that we believe will provide value and insight to those serving in the nonprofit sector. We will highlight new developments in the field, latest research, and things we're learning from our own clients that we can share.
Welcome, everyone, to the Calibration Point Podcast, and today I am my own guest. I had a number of people ask if I would do just a midsummer, early summer kind of update, maybe more reminder on some fundamentals about who's giving, what the impact of the generations are on giving, and what it means, or kind of where we are in the coming years with this well talked about intergenerational transfer of wealth. And I decided that I would go ahead and do that for this month. It seems that it was good timing coming into middle of summer. July would be a good time. Everybody's recalibrating and thinking about what they're going to do in the next half of the year. So I thought I would take today and take a few minutes on this month's podcast just to reinforce a few things on those topics. So let's start with the topic of who gives. Who's giving in the United States? And I want to reinforce things that we've talked about on here numerous times. Those of you who have read my stuff, we've taught about them. The research is out there, but the number one driver, at least in the United States, on who gives is people of faith. We don't know what faith worldview. That's not how the data is tracked, but we do know faith is the number one determinant on people who are giving. Number two, volunteers. The supermajority of those who give are volunteers. We use the saying a lot that volunteers are one of the number one litmus tests to how successful a fundraising program will be. And if you're engaging volunteers and they're not giving to your organization, they're giving somewhere else. And it's always good to know, how do we build a holistic relationship with someone? If they love cats, I want them to figure out with me how we can invest their time, their spirit, and their financial resources in the thing that they love. So volunteers being a number two major driver on who gives. And number three, we know the women. The research that's out right now from a number of different sources, Women's Philanthropy Institute, I believe it was their study that just released, said that I think it was 60 or 62% of donors right now in the United States are women. The average direct mail donor that's giving right now is a female who's age 64. So women on average, the research from a few years ago showed that women of the same economic and income bracket as their male counterparts give on average about 156% more than their male counterparts when those things are normalized. So women are a major influence. We know that women have a tendency to give differently than men. If you're not familiar with that, I highly recommend that you look at the Women's Philanthropy Institute, the phenomenal resources that they have at the Women's Philanthropy Institute on just understanding the nuances of how women give, the trends in women's giving. So number three being women, number four being families. We know that families still give about 120% more than single individuals. And families where, if they have children, are a major driver of how they volunteer. And lastly, we know that itemizers, those who are taking tax itemizations, while that is not a determinant, at least in all the research that I've ever seen, of whether someone will give versus not give, we do know that the trend shows that those who are itemizing in their taxes are giving larger and larger amounts every year. And this is important from the standpoint that the donor pool, the general trend is that the donor pool, the number of donors who are giving, is getting smaller on an annual basis, but those who are giving more. And there are a few different rationales, I guess, and studies that have pointed to why that is the case. And some of the big ones are that it's easier to feel good and do other things. I can buy sustainably resourced coffee grounds and get coffee from a small coffee shop, and I can feel good about that. I can buy products from an artisan in Africa, and I can feel good about that. I can go to a GoFundMe site. I can help someone with their medical bills or their college, and I can feel good about that if I'm not necessarily concerned about a tax deduction. Things that historically people sought out the nonprofit sector to engage them in helping others. There are a lot of unique ways in the last years that have evolved, and different studies show that those are a bit of a detraction from the individual who may have traditionally just engaged directly with a nonprofit organization. Another big piece of that, the research, and I believe it was Pew, I'd have to fact check myself on that, but I think it was the Pew study that showed that one of the biggest rationales or reasons that they're showing on why we're seeing a shrinking donor pool is a couple things. One, the baby boomers is the largest generation, the Xers is the smallest, and those coming behind them, and the millennials are the biggest, but the millennials are now the first full generation that we've seen a tendency of moving away from church attendance at the same time that we've seen churches moving away from teaching about stewardship and the joy of generosity and giving. And the study that I had read was talking about the coalesce of those things coming together, that as we have fewer in that generation that are actually in the church, we also have churches that are doing less shaping of giving behaviors. And historically, the church in the United States has been the number one shaper of philanthropic behaviors from a monetary perspective. So there are a number of things that are coinciding that we just need to be aware of, which presents a tremendous opportunity for us if we understand not only who's currently giving, where giving comes from, but especially the opportunity we have generationally. And I want to maybe dig into that generational piece just a little bit more. I mentioned just the shrinking of the donor pool and the expansion of those who are giving. A few other things that I want to tie into that to maybe give a little bit more context. Currently, 70% of all giving is coming from baby boomers, and 17% is coming from the Generation Xers. And keep in mind, the boomers are, I believe, that somewhere around 56 up until about 75, and then we get into the silent generation. And millennials, I believe, right now are about, the Xers are about 55, 56, down to about 40-ish. And then the millennials are going to be late 30-somethings down to, I believe it's the mid-20s, early 20s. And then we've got the Acers coming in behind them, or the Zers, depending on what terminology we're using. But 87% of giving right now is coming from the Xers and the boomers. And the research shows that it's about 20 to 25 years, at least, until the millennials are the primary economic influencers in giving. And we could unpack that and really understand why, if we wanted to dig deeper into that. Career seeding, placement, wealth creation. Millennials are pushing out starting families later in life. They're pushing out getting married later in life. All have impacts on how we give. There's a host of things that we could track if we want to spend more time on just that. Other than, I think right now what we want to take away from is just knowing that we probably need to pay a little bit more attention to boomers and Xers in how we think about who's giving and where we are in the foreseeable future. And I bring that up because I'm really surprised at how much attention the millennials are receiving just as a generation on giving. I just can't recount how many conversations or emails or phone calls that I have with individuals in development or leaders or board members who are concerned about where they need to be focusing on giving, and they're immediately jumping from thinking about boomers to, I need to just engage millennials. We need to engage millennials. And I'm all for engaging millennials, everyone. No concerns there. Only to say that, and that we have to make sure that we are at the same time understanding how we're engaging baby boomers and how we're engaging the Generation Xers. And there seems to be almost this generation skip where the discussion goes from, we got to engage boomers to we got to engage millennials, but there's an entire generation, the Generation X, that is in the middle there. And the millennials have quite a few years before they're the primary economic influencers. And so I just simply say from that, be sure that you're not skipping generations. We want to find people who love our cause. It doesn't matter what their age is. So be sure that we don't fall into kind of the identity focus of generations, but instead make sure that we understand the nuances of each generation, how they care about our organization, how we engage them, and then seek out the right approaches to build holistic relationships with them so that no matter what age they are, again, so that they can find fulfillment in what it is that we do and share in our vision and share in our values and our mission with us and begin to do something together. Last piece I want to dovetail that into is this generational transfer of wealth. And that is that the last study that I saw, and I believe it came out, the most recent one that I saw was, I think it was by Financial Advisor IQ, and this might have been about a month or so ago, so earlier in the year, but the focus is that by 2045, they're saying that the boomers and the silent generation will transfer about $84 trillion in wealth to other generations, and about approximately 12 trillion of that wealth transfer is going to come to the nonprofit sector. The rest is going to go and be transferred to heirs. That's a lot of money, and that's a lot of asset. It's also important to keep that perspective, and I've talked about this in numerous podcasts that I've done in the past couple of years, that depending on the research, somewhere between 99 to 97% of all wealth in the United States is held in non-cash assets. So what are non-cash? Real estate, investables, equities, mutual funds. Collectibles would be a piece of that too, but the majority is going to be real estate, or it's going to be in some kind of investable asset. And again, that's 99 to 97% of all wealth is held that way. From the perspective of giving, we know that there's a lot of various research studies, and the last one I saw was probably now about 2 or 3 years ago. It might have been by AFRC, I'm not positive, but they showed in their research that the average nonprofit organization that was focused on raising money through non-cash strategies grew about 6 times faster than those that were focused on cash. That's a simple thing we can do. Be sure you're opening those conversations with donors. Be sure that you know that they know that you have a brokerage account set up, that it's easy to make a non-cash gift to you. There's a lot at stake with this generational transfer of wealth, and a lot of money that's transitioning between heirs. But again, 12 trillion of that's coming into the nonprofit sector, and non-cash giving is much more resilient giving than cash giving. And it's also by far the supermajority of where wealth is held. If I want to make things easier for a donor, be sure that I'm educating to them about how they can make gifts through non-cash. And I'll close on just an example. I had a couple of times where I've had a group of different nonprofit leaders together and have asked them what the average size was of gifts they were receiving through their brokerage accounts in non-cash from their donors. And the perception is that, oh, well, at least what I hear is that typically, those gifts are going to be $5, $10, $15, $20, $25,000. And I've asked this now in a number of different group settings with a lot of different organizations. And it seems that the majority of them in these organizations, when I ask this question, say that $500, $750 is a really common number for them to get through non-cash. Doesn't mean that they're not getting the $5,000 and $10,000 non-cash gifts, but a very common number for them, meaning a common gift amount, is they're finding that donors will use it for closer to routine or some of their ongoing giving, if it's in the $500 to $750 range, $1,000. So I only share that, and I want to be careful that we don't make assumptions that non-cash giving is only going to look a certain way and have a certain number of zeros behind it. There's just not a lot of support to that. And what we do know is that the number one reason that donors don't make non-cash gifts is simply they didn't know they could, and they didn't know the organization had a brokerage account set up, and that it was easy to do. And also because organizations aren't talking about it. And don't fall into the assumption that a non-cash gift, again, has to have a certain number of zeros behind it. I would talk to a donor about a $250 non-cash gift, just like I would a $5,000. I want to make sure that they are having all the opportunities that they can to make giving easy for them to give out of their wealth as well as out of cash flow. And this all brings back the full picture. We need to know who's giving. I also need to know where giving's come from, where giving is coming from, the generations and why they're giving, and understand that I can't skip generations and jump from one just to bypass another because I think that that's now the focus I have to have. And the other is don't lose sight of non-cash giving. This picture hasn't changed. 3 years ago, I did a podcast on here, and you can look it up on basically this very topic, non-cash giving. I believe it was January 2019, perhaps, I think it was when it was. And a lot of those trends have not changed. This is still a major opportunity. It's something that we have to understand in the sector. And it's not about how big the organization is or how many zeros are behind the number. So I hope this little refresher, maybe motivator, maybe reminder was helpful. I know I had a couple people or a number of people ask if I would do something like this. So decided this was the month to do it. If you have any questions, you know how to reach us. Good luck as you go through the summer, and hopefully you'll be prepared for whatever comes in the fall. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the J.D. Levy & Associates Calibration Point Podcast. If you have comments or ideas for future episodes, please reach out using the contact page on our website, jdlevyassociates.com.